All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here. I'm Joe Paschal. My wife, Vicki, and I, live here in Brenham, Texas, and moved up from South Texas last year. Spent about a year working for the Brahmin Association, and then decided I'd just sort of come back and run my own cows and feed my own cattle and do what the hell I wanted to do. And I'm here with my wife, Vicki, and my daughter, Dr. Helen Phillips, and her husband, Chad, and with A.J. Knowles. A.J. is the Director of Breed Improvement with the American Brahmin Breeders Association. And just really appreciate Johnny and Carolyn asking us to come down and visit with y'all a little bit. And what Johnny wanted me to talk about was this concept of hybrid vigor or heterosis that seems to be kicked around and bandied around. Several breed associations are promoting it and talking about it. And it's really a pretty simple idea. And it's just about genes. And like sometimes I like to carry a banana around when I give this talk. Everybody knows what a banana looks like, right? And I tell people, I said, if I had this banana in my hand and looking at you, this banana and y'all share about 50% of the same genome. So anytime you get to thinking about how high and mighty you might be, think about the lowly banana, okay? Don't have the same genes, but you share about 50% of the same genome. So what hybrid vigor is, and this breed is 75 years old this year, right? The Brangus guys started it. The Brangus breed really got picked from Louisiana State University. Anybody here from LSU? At the Generette Station, there was a group of guys that were there, and what they did is they had a Brahmin cow, and they had an Angus cow. And then they had a half-blood cow, half-blood Brahmin and half-blood Angus. And then they had a cow that was 1/4 Angus, 3/4 Brahmin, and another cow that was just the opposite. She was 3/4 Angus, 1/4 Brahmin. And they had those cows and they tied them up outside in the sun during a hot day. And what they were doing is they were looking for adaptability. Which one of those cows was the most adaptive? And the way that they looked at that is which cow was uncomfortable. They were looking at, were they panting, were they breathing, were they moving around? And along about mid-morning, okay, they got to look in, and of course the Brahmin cow, she laid down right away because she was already comfortable. And then that quarter-blood cow laid down, and then finally the half-blood cow. But those other two, they had so much Angus in them, they were hot, they were looking for shade, they were panting. And that was sort of the start of this idea that, you know what, maybe there's something to this cross between Angus and Brahmin in terms of environmental adaptability. Now the biggest cross was half Brahmin and half Angus, right? And so you think about that, half the genes from the tropically adapted breed, half the genes from a temperate breed. Where did the Angus cattle come from? Anybody know? They used to be called Aberdeen Angus. Where's Aberdeen at? Scotland, right? It's a little bit chillier today in Scotland than it is here, right? And so you think about, well, those cattle are in Scotland, it's really cold. How in the world do they survive down in this part of the world? And so if you put those Brahmin genetics in there, those Bosindicus genetics, you make them a little bit more hot climate adapted. And so you think about that half and half, okay, I can understand that. But the more important thing is that it's sort of like if you have $1 over here and you put them together, you say, okay, I've got $2. That's an F1. That's a cross between two breeds. But they didn't get $2. They actually got like $2.50 out of that cross. They've got an extra kick from something. So I'll go back to my banana, Okay? Us and the bananas, we share about 50% of our genes, which, by the way, if you have children here, if you have children, you share exactly 50% of your genes with children. So your relationship to your children is about the same as your relationship to the banana. Sometimes that works out. Okay? But you know what? We're getting more than 50% out of this cross. We're getting more than 50%, and what we're getting is this extra kick. And 70 years ago, they called it hybrid because it was a hybrid. It was a cross between two different animals. They call it hybrid vigor, improved performance. Now, crossbreeding is not new. It didn't happen 75 years ago. We've crossed cattle, we've crossed livestock, we've crossed crops for hundreds of years. All right, so we've made different, look at what we've done to corn, for goodness sake. Think about what we've done to a lot of the agronomic crops. And of course the chickens that we produce today in the homes. So it's not like a new thought. But the idea is that we've been able to establish what's actually happening. So we talk about that first cross between two animals, and we'll say, since we've got Brangus here, we're going to talk about Brahman and Angus. We call that first cross, we call that an F1. And when that calf is born on the ground, okay, whether it's a Brahman bull or an Angus cow or an Angus bull and a Brahman cow, at every point on their 30 chromosomes, 30 pairs of chromosomes, every gene, one comes from a Brahman, one comes from an Angus. Okay? Just like your children, on every one of their chromosomes, on every point of their chromosome, one of their genes came from you, and the other gene came from the other parent, okay, your spouse. All right? And so as we look at that, that's exactly 50%. So that's why we call that an F1. That's the highest level of heterosis. That's the greatest difference that we can have. Now the interesting thing about hybrid vigor, and I just used a new term there, I used one of those 50-cent words that when you go to college you learn. It's called heterosis. And heterosis comes from a word, okay, hetero means different, right? So if you think about looking at all the genes in an animal, heterosis means how different are they? So we have 100% heterosis in that F1, and because of that, every gene, so if I'm in a tropical part of the country, the genes from the Brahman work for me. If I'm in Montana in a snowstorm, the genes from the Angus work for me. Okay, if I'm, say for example, if I'm feeding cattle, the Angus genes are going to work for me more than the Brahman genes. But if I'm running cows out here in the country, like particularly in South or South Central Texas, then the Brahman genes are going to work for me. So it gives me an ability to operate in a range of environments. So think of it like a hill, right? So way up here, some genes work better than others. Down here, those other genes work better. That's the vigor part. Okay? That's the vigor part. And so typically what we said is that those genes that work that way are a special kind of gene. All right? They are the kind of gene that don't transmit from one generation to the next very well. So Johnny's got in his cell catalog, if you look at the bulls, he's got the most current expected progeny differences for all of his bulls listed down there in that little box underneath the photograph. Okay? Those are genes that are used for selection purposes, and they go from one generation to the next. You can look at that and say, I want a high Cantonese bull, and you can look at that CED box, and you can look for a bull that's 5 or 6 or 7, and you know that he's going to sire calves that are also going to be high in Cantonese. That's the beauty of those EPDs. But the genes that cause heterosis or higher vigor are more like the genes that you're familiar with that cause differences in coat color, like red versus black, like corn versus pole, like maybe a white spot on an animal in the back. Those are the genes that are either dominant or recessive. And the interaction of those genes is what helps us have heterosis. Okay? And so if we look at the F1 has the highest level of heterosis, we say 100%. What does that mean to us? So what would you think of if I say F1? What kind of cow do y'all think about? If I say F1 cow, you better say Angus Bronco, right? That's what this group's all about. But that's exactly right. F1 cow has the highest level of heterosis. What traits are affected though? What traits are affected? Y'all tell me, what traits? If I've got an F1 cow out there, what do I expect her to do better than any other cow? Hey, tell me. Fertility. Heck yeah. Okay? F1 cows have the highest level of heterosis for fertility. In all environments, by the way, not just the one that they're raised in. What else? What goes along with fertility? Milking ability. Who said that? Thank you. Milking ability. That's right. The F1 cow has a lot of hybrid vigor, the most hybrid vigor for milking ability. So what does that mean, an F1 cow, when she calves, what does that mean to her calf? What does that mean to her calf, that extra milking ability? Tell me, what do you sell? Weaning weight, exactly. So heterosis or hybrid vigor is high for those traits that are often hardest to select for. Fertility, milking ability. What's another one that causes that in terms of hybrid vigor that affects F1 cows? What else? Anybody here 80 years old? No, I won't get in, I'm just kidding. Longevity. Okay? Reproductive longevity, not just age. Reproductive longevity. Okay, that means that she'll have more calves over a longer period of time. And in fact, probably about two more calves, okay, than the average straight bred cow. Think about that. Two more calves, you pay the same amount of money, you raise her, cow costs being all the same, you don't have to buy replacements nearly as often. And they weigh heavier. What about today? It's kind of hot and muggy. We've already talked about her being more tropically adapted. She's got a little loss indicus in it. Okay? What about this? I know Johnny and Carol have been working on this. What about internal and external parasite resistance? What do you think about that? Take a cow from Scotland, Aberdeen Angus, we brought her over here to Central Texas and ran her down here in the river bottom. How do you think she'd do? She'd have a tough time, wouldn't she? She'd be subjected to stomach worms. She'd be subjected to liver flukes. She'd be subjected to flies, horn flies particularly, and probably hard ticks as well. Okay? She'd be not as tropically adapted because she's got a black hair coat. She'd have a long hair coat, right? And so if you think about the F1, you start getting some of the benefits of that other breed, okay, that Los Angeles Brahman breed that comes in and allows her to adapt a little bit better and allows John and Carolyn to select a little bit better for parasite resistance and external parasite tolerance, right? You're still going to have some flies. You may still have some stomach bugs. You may still have a few liver fluid, but you head in the right direction. Okay, you head in the right direction. So that's the F1. F1 has the highest level of hybrid vigor or heterosis, worth at least about 2 calves, maybe a little bit more. And it works in those traits like longevity, environmental adaptability, fertility, milkability, and calf growth. So, but that's not what Brangus cattle are, right? So Brangus cattle are 5/8 and 3/8. 5/8 Angus, 3/8 Brahman, or 3/8 Los Indicus. And so how we got there is a couple of different ways. We could have used 3/4 blood Brahman bulls on Angus cows and got there, or we could have used half bloods with 3/4 blood Angus bulls. Either way will get you there. But when you get there, what do you have? It's not an F1. It's pretty close. 5/8 and 3/8. F1 is 4/8 and 4/8. We're talking about a 5/8 and 3/8. So how much heterosis do you still have? Okay? How much heterosis do you still have? You have, okay, if you were to do the math, it's pretty easy, but essentially what you've got is about 30/64 or 15/37. You've got almost the same amount. Okay? Almost the same amount. So you haven't reduced heterosis at all. You get almost exactly the same benefits using the 5/8, 3/8. Now I know, because we've had a lot of discussions, not just John and Carolyn and I, but probably some of y'all in the breed, and maybe amongst other breeders, that, you know, we can select these cattle to be anything we want them to be. If you look at the cattle that we have today, they're vastly different than what we had 100 years ago. I wouldn't laugh back then, I just take a word for it. All right? But we have changed cattle. Go back and look at the cattle that we selected in the 1980s. You don't have to go back and actually remember, you can go back and look at the show pictures, right? Because, you know, in the 70s, 60s, the cattle were here, and then the 70s they were here, and then the 80s they were here, because you can hardly see who was judging them. Maybe they're a little bit higher. Now we started to move that back down. Okay, so we can actually select cattle to be anything we want them to be. What we have to be careful of is that, remember, I told you that heterosis doesn't stay the same from generation to generation. It does once you fix a type, okay, like 5/8, 3/8. But what happens is you say, you know, I'm looking at this animal, and I'm thinking I'm going to get 10 cents more a pound because they're black. Okay, that used to be back in the 1980s, the Angus craze. I'm going to get more money if I take my cattle and put a black Angus bull on. That's true. There was a lot of market for those cattle through the Certified Angus Beef program. All right, so people started keeping those cattle, and they had half bloods, and then they put Angus bulls on those F1s, and then they had 3/4 bloods, which cut their heterosis in half and reduced their environmental adaptability quite a bit if you happen to be in the South. And then we had 7/8. Okay? What happened to weaning weight? As we started to lose heterosis for fertility and milk production in really tough environments, and I know that at times this environment around here seems tough, but it's not nearly as tough as a lot of environments in the South and the Southeast. We lose weaning weight. Okay? So today at the market, what are calves worth? If I had a 500-pound black calf, went to the sale barn over here at Brenham, what would it have brought today? The last sale day. What would it have brought on? Sale on Monday. Anybody know? $2.45 a pound. Okay? Okay. Let's use $2.50 because I'm an Aggie and that's math. I got to worry about the math. So a 500-pound calf was worth $2.50. Okay? That's, do the math for me, what we got. Okay, so 500 pounds, that's 1,000, so it's $1,250. That's what it brought. A pound of calf brings $250. Okay, now, if he were black, he might have brought $240. He might have. So now we're talking about $50 less. What happened if that calf weighed 20 pounds less? or 25 pounds less. What have we lost? 62.50. And so what I'm telling you is that lots of times when we change colors or we change type, trying to chase a little bit more dollar because it's a little bit more Angusy looking, what have we lost? We lost weight to sell. What's more valuable? 10 cents more a pound or 25 pounds more weaning weight? Okay, that's not unrealistic. Years ago, when I visited with some folks at King Ranch, and they were changing their breed. Y'all remember Senator Trudeau's cattle? Still very popular. It's 5/8, 3/8, just like Rangus is. They use 5/8 Shorthorn, 3/8 Brahman. Okay? And what they were going to do is they were going to reduce the Brahman percentage from 3/8 to 3/16. Now I know that's a hard number to get your head around, but essentially they were going to cut the Los Indicus in half. You know what they figured it cost them in weaning weight to do that? Now this is Kingsville, 200 miles south of here. They figured it would cost them about 50 pounds in weaning weight. Now it didn't bother them because they fed all their own cattle. But think about 50 pounds of weaning weight loss, what it would do to you, because suddenly you decided that 3/8 Brahman was too much in your herd, in your Brangus herd, and you wanted to cut it down to 3/16. Can you stand a 50-pound drop in weaning weight? A 50-pound drop in weaning weight at $2.50 a pound? It's $125. Right? And so you have to think about that. We've got to be careful. We've got cattle, you've got good cattle, you've got hybrid breeders for those cattle, and it's important to maintain that type of animal. Okay, in my opinion. And if you look at cattle that are out here in the sale ring, out here in the barn, and behind us, you can look at their ear shape, and you can look at their performance. They look like Brangus cattle. They look like the kind of cattle that Briggs and Noble put together many, many years ago. That used to be run at Granada 40 years ago with the kind of ear. And the reason why we need that, okay, the genetics are there. The genetics are in the breed, in the entire industry. But y'all need to pay attention to maintaining as much of that, also with the genetics as possible, to keep your cattle fertile, to keep them maternal, and keep them environmentally adapted, and to put more pounds of weaning weight in your pocket on sale day. I want to stop there. I know we got steaks ready. I can smell them. If you have any questions, I'll be around, John. Would that be all right? Nothing to do here. Y'all just holler at me. Oh, well, okay. Thanks, John. So there's an old saying, and a good friend of mine, he's retired now. He said a good extension specialist is seldom with a thought, but never without a word. Okay? Well, those of y'all know me. So what John was asking me, or reminding me about, was the immune system. So the immune system, the ability to resist disease. We talk about parasites, external parasites and internal parasites. But this is what really, I'm going to take about 5 more minutes. It's something that really surprised me. Many years ago, we ran a program that was called the Ranch to Rail program. Anybody ever participated in it or hear about it? Okay, so people would send cattle, we'd put them in a feed yard, and we'd watch the performance of those cattle. What we also did is that we looked at the cattle that were coming in, and people told us what they were. They were Brangus, or they were Sacrificius, or they were Hereford, or Charolais, or whatever it happened to be. So what I did is I went back and looked at the medicine costs, the treatment costs of those different types of cattle. And what we found is that as we had a quarter blood Brahman, 3/8 Brahman, or Los Indicus, 1/2 blood, the medicine costs were significantly lower. And as soon as we got above that, as soon as we got even full blood cattle, those medicine costs were 3 to 4 times as high. Because higher vigor not only affects those other things, but it affects the immune system as well. It's kicked in earlier and stays longer. So that's something to think about. Y'all running cows out in the country, don't have to be feeding cattle in the feed yard to see the benefits of an improved immune system in that crossbred cow. All right, thank y'all.
Remember that story about the tying up the cows? That was good. The only thing I can say, we keep calves in the feedlot, and we hard to and Mike Marshall, the superior rep here, he said, honestly, virtually every feedlot likes to touch me here in the weekend. So anyhow, I'm going to let my wife come up here and share a word about grandson who was blessed, and I think